Ladies and gentlemen, workers' playtime.
Workers' playtime is your labor, morning shift is done. Have a playtime.
You say, Tommy, what valuable lessons have you learnt in life? Glad you asked. With sufficient initial thrust, pigs fly just fine. Women may not hit harder, but they hit lower. If at first you don't succeed, parachuting's not for you. And here's the best advice from old Tommy for the invasion. Are you ready? To be sure of hitting the target, shoot first, then call whatever you hit the target.
Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France.
On June the 6th, the largest seaborne invasion in history begins with Operation Neptune, D-Day. This is the opening salvo of Operation Overlord, the battle to retake Normandy. The weather is far from ideal. The opposition is fierce at several beaches, and the Allies fail to achieve any of their goals on the first day. But the combined sea, land, and airborne operations prevail. The Allies secure the much-needed 5 beachheads, link them up, then push inland to take the next series of objectives from the Germans, against bitter and determined resistance. Back home, the news is upbeat, the British jubilant. The Allies have a foothold and are back in Europe. Some even dare to imagine the war could be over by Christmas. But for London and the home counties, a new nightmare is about to begin. One week after D-Day, Archie Raitt and Ernest Woodland of the Royal Observer Corps are manning their post on the overcast night of June the 13th. Their position, designated Mike 2, is a good one, a sandbagged post on top of Martello Tower number 25 over there, overlooking Dymchurch Beach. These thick-set mini-forts were ironically built 150 years before to fend off the expected invasion of another dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. Just after midnight, the Germans' cross-channel artillery begins pounding Folkestone with the town's heaviest ever bombardment. Then, something strange. The artillery stops hitting Folkestone, the range is dramatically extended, and shells begin falling across the borough of Maidstone, 31 miles further inland. At 4:08 a.m, Messrs. Rate and Woodland in their Martello Tower observe a distant flaming object in the direction of Boulogne. It looks like a plane on fire, and it's headed their way. As it draws near, the noise comes to them, like an old motorbike with a broken exhaust, struggling up a hill.
This is OP Mike 2, diver, on 4, northwest 101.
Meanwhile, across the Channel, Flak Regiment 155W's commanding officer, Oberst Max Wachtel, is not a happy colonel. There's not a chance he's going to be able to fulfill the Führer's demand for 500 flying bombs a day. Constant Allied bombing is smashing up his mobile launch sites as fast as Wachtel's men can put them together. Not only that, the railways are under constant enemy air attack. Road convoys are strafed by marauding Tempests, Thunderbolts and P-38s. For Max Wachtel, getting supplies of V1s, fuel, Walter steam catapults, mobile ramps and spares has become his new definition of cruel and unusual punishment. Still, by 3:30 a.m. early on the morning of Tuesday, June the 13th, 10 flying bombs are available for launching, which is better than nothing. Max Wachtel can no longer delay. He orders his side commanders to fuel up those bombs and launch them at precisely 4 a.m.
Eisbär.
Eisbär!
Eisbär! Eisbär!
It's not the all-engulfing revenge attack for D-Day Adolf Hitler was expecting. Of the 10 bombs launched, 5 crash shortly after takeoff. A 6th is seen plunging into the sea off the French coast, while the remaining 4 throb away across the English Channel towards the Kent coast. And beyond that, London. OP Mike 2's flying bomb crashes in open farmland outside Swanscombe near Gravesend. The second bomb blows the door off a pigsty in Cuckfield, East Sussex, rewarding the animals with a few hours of freedom. Another V1 comes down near Borough Green in someone's large back garden and makes a terrible mess of some greenhouses. But the final bomb makes it through the London flak belt and hits the railway bridge at Grove Road in East London's Mile End. The missile kills 6 people, including 8-month-old baby Tom. 30 are badly hurt. Then, after that, nothing. London and the home counties are bracing themselves for the onslaught which they know is to come. But across the Channel, Max Wachtel still has problems. He's briefly halted launch operations to spend a day and a half frantically freeing up his supply lines to get serious numbers of flying bombs, fuel, essential spares and equipment out to the dozens of launch sites he's got spread out across northern France. He does this mostly at night to avoid the inevitability of Allied airstrikes. In London, the lull causes the Allied chiefs to exchange nervous glances. They have initially devised 4 layers of defence against the incoming bombs. Firstly, the fastest fighters will patrol over the Channel coast and Kent to have first crack at the V1s. Their orders are to shoot them down in open country.
You mean Kent and Sussex?
Yes, open country.
There is, of course, that lurking fear among pilots that their actions could result in civilian deaths if a flying bomb was shot down onto a village or a town. But the people of Kent would later declare that it had been a privilege to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Londoners, who were the main target.
One doodlebug down in a Kent orchard is one less for London. And if it cooks them apples, well, that'd be dinner.
One of the famous frontline air units who will defend the capital is No. 91 Squadron RAF. Known as the Nigeria Squadron to honour the nation which paid for their planes, 91 is based at RAF West Malling in the summer of 1944. The pilots are flying the new Spitfire 14s equipped with the monster 2,000 horsepower Griffon engine, which pushes the Spitfire's speed to well over 350 miles per hour. But V1s are reputed to top 420, so special tactics may be required. Meet Flying Officer Ken Collier. Ken's from Sydney, Australia. And this is Warrant Officer Tony Bloomer, known to his colleagues as Red on account of his hair. Red's also from down under, in fact, from a suburb in Sydney just 4 miles from where Ken Collier grew up. And this is the dashing Captain Jean Marador of the Free French Air Force. Jean's from Le Havre, Normandy, so obviously has a special reason to be in a Spitfire these days. While at West Malling, Jean has also met the love of his life, Section Officer Jean Lambourne. So we have Jean and Jean. And then there are these ruffians on the front line at Newchurch, down on Romney Marsh. Under the leadership of Wing Commander Roland Beaumont, 150 Wing are flying the new Tempest 5s, powered by the Napier Sabre engine. Top speed at sea level, 400 miles per hour. 4 20mm cannons, like these. Pilots new to this brutal aircraft are understandably nervous. The Tempest's predecessor, the Typhoon, had suffered structural failures in dives, resulting in the entire tail section of the aircraft snapping off. Carbon monoxide was known to seep into the cockpit, asphyxiating the pilot. Would the new Tempest 5, a monster that is to be flown to the far frontiers of its engineering against the V1, fare any better? When No. 274 Squadron received theirs, Commanding Officer and Canadian ace James Edwards recalls the occasion.
My pilots were a little anxious about flying the new Tempest. However, the first aircraft was delivered by the Air Transport Auxiliary, and the pretty young lady who piloted it powdered her nose, put on her lipstick before she got out of the cockpit. So they decided that the Tempest was not that difficult to fly.
Behind the fighters, stretching across the western and central home counties, there is the gun belt. This comprises hundreds of 3.7-inch and 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft guns, which will blast away in an attempt to destroy the tiny, fast-moving targets that get by the fighters. Behind the gun belt, there's the balloon belt just outside the southeastern approaches to the capital. Balloon squadrons have been arriving all week from all over the country in huge convoys. The crews rapidly deploy their winches and inflation equipment, and within hours, the great silver whales rise up into the sky.
The winds off the Thames used to create this strange, discordant whistling as they blew through the hundreds of cables that tethered the balloons. A beautiful siren song enticing the hapless doodlebugs to their fiery fate. That's what I used to think anyway.
Down in Kent, things had started looking up for Marden Village. The Royal Army Service Corps supply depot in Pattenden Lane has been rushed off its feet catering food supplies to the large number of anti-aircraft gun personnel in the area, as well as the military units passing through on their way out to Normandy. The bakery boys trundle in trolleys full of freshly baked loaves. RASC Private Ken Tippett and ATS Private Gladys Hager roll their eyes at the increased workload. But this is the morning on Thursday, June the 15th, that a new sound fills the skies over Marden. An odd, rattling, throbbing sound like a badly tuned Austin 10 with a blown head gasket. Curious faces turn skyward. Across the channel in northern France, Max Wachtel has just restarted launch operations. After 30 hours of freeing up their supply lines, Flak Regiment 155W is now fully restocked with bombs and fuel. Wachtel's field commanders now set to with a vengeance. This time they launch over 220 flying bombs in 24 hours. More than 60 make it through the Allied defences to London and crash down onto the capital.
There was this terrible silence. It just seemed like the whole world stopped.
Over the coming days, the bombs come thick and fast. The gun belt artillery units, unaccustomed to shooting such small and rapid objects at low altitude, fail to lead the targets far enough, so most get through. Worse, fighters attempting to shoot the bombs out of the sky at the same time are themselves in danger of being shot down by their own artillery. The anti-aircraft guns in London fare little better. General Sir Frederick Pyle, Chief of Anti-Aircraft Command, would later write,
"At the beginning of the battle, the London guns had joined in the shooting, but the mere act of hitting it was of little use, for all they succeeded in doing was to bring the missile down onto the very target at which it was aimed. For this reason, the London guns were restricted, and all that Londoners, who had got used to the comforting roar of the defences, saw was the flying bombs arriving and crashing and spreading devastation, while all around there was a depressing silence."
You're an office worker coming home around 6, and this is your house. You're a passenger on a cross-town bus, and this is the end of your last trip. You're a kid at school, and this is your lesson for the day. You're an airman on leave, and this is your welcome mat. You're a diner in a restaurant, and this is where you had your last bite. You're a patient in a hospital, and this is your final treatment.
June the 18th, early Sunday morning. The Germans launch their 500th diver. It makes it through the fighters, the gunboat, the balloons, right into the heart of the capital. The pulse jet cuts and the bomb plunges into Hungerford railway bridge, spanning the Thames at Charing Cross. 2 hours later, at 10 minutes to 9, another bomb explodes nearby in Rutherford Street, Westminster. The blast brings down 2 blocks of flats, killing and injuring dozens of residents. And 2 hours after that, at 11 a.m, the Guards' Chapel in Birdcage Walk, Westminster, is packed with military and their families for the Sunday service. Not long after it starts, a V1 is heard approaching, and those within hear the engine cut. The bomb hits the chapel and explodes, collapsing the roof down onto the congregation. 121 military and civilian personnel are killed, and 141 seriously injured.
I was on many a job within minutes before the smoke had gone down. It was horrific, really. And you'd have people, members of the family, or possibly neighbours and people they knew, seeing dismembered bodies laying all over the street. And there were scenes of terrible distress. I saw so much of it that I hardened myself. I couldn't afford to be emotional about it, otherwise I wouldn't have been doing my job.
The bombing of the Guards' Chapel and the great loss of life and injury appall the nation. Outwardly, Londoners maintain their stoic demeanour in the face of this second blitz. But everyone's worn out, edgy after 5 years of war. Up to 2 million begin evacuating the city in the coming weeks, leaving the usually bustling streets eerily silent. The children are the first to be taken to safety.
For the second time in this war, and to another 120,000 of them, comes the great adventure. So it's goodbye to the cities and danger areas, labelled and loaded and not forgetting their gas masks. The children head for the special trains, and they're not worrying, they're off on a holiday.
I was sent away in 1940 during the Blitz. And here I was now 4 years later at the same railway station with another tag on me. This time I was off to somewhere called Chipping Norton. Maybe the doodlebugs had never heard of it either.
Across the Channel, the Allied invasion forces are making steady progress against stiff enemy resistance in the Normandy bocage.
Well, you can hear machine guns firing from the hedgerow about a couple of 100 yards up from where I am.
But Arthur Harris, Chief of RAF Bomber Command, is becoming frustrated. Much to his annoyance, the Allied chiefs, including Eisenhower, keep diverting his bomber force to attack tactical and transport targets in support of the Normandy breakout. Harris wants intense pressure to be forced onto the enemy far closer to home. What happened to Cologne, Hamburg, and dozens of other cities shook the German High Command. Harris now pushes for a campaign of constant 1,000-bomber raids together with the Americans. The enemy's cities must be obliterated to bring an end to their industrial output of war material. The strategy will not only have a devastating effect on factory worker morale, the relentless attacks would force the enemy to divert significant numbers of guns and personnel away from the battlefronts to defend the German heartland. Back in England, the V1 onslaught continues. Too many bombs are surviving the gauntlet of fighters, guns and balloons to crash down on indiscriminate targets across London and the southeast. Meanwhile, Churchill and the Allied chiefs are brainstorming new ways in which the bombs can be stopped. The Americans say they have something. And then, 10 days into the V1 campaign, down on the south coast, there's something of a breakthrough. June the 23rd, 91 Squadron's Ken Collier latches onto a flying bomb hurtling over the coast at Beachy Head. Repeated bursts of gunfire have no effect except to run Collier out of ammunition. Furious at the thought of the bomb getting away, the Australian pulls up alongside the diver, tucks his Spitfire's right wing under the stubby wing of the bomb, and then flips it.
I tipped my wing up and tilted the bomb until it slipped off and disappeared underneath me. That gave me a bit of a shock. I immediately hauled back on the stick and moved away. I decided I hadn't tipped it up to the angle required to topple normal gyros, so I'd have another shot at it. I formatted again, got my wing under it as before, only a bit further under to get better leverage. I tilted it slowly till I thought I had it over far enough, then gave it a final push and moved away to see what happened. Much to my delight, it rolled over on its back and spiraled down. The flame went out before it got to the ground, and it exploded in a field, near a town. There was a brilliant flash. I felt absolutely jubilant and a bit staggered.
Early the following day, a fighter shoots down a diver over Ashford, but the bomb plunges into the Newlands military camp near Charing. 52 service personnel are killed, 80 seriously injured. Minutes after the Newland camp is hit, another flying bomb is shot down by a fighter over nearby Smarden village and dives into a farm. Fighter pilots daily find themselves flying 5, sometimes 6 sorties per day. Men and machines soon suffer from the hectic pressure of operations. Australian Warrant Officer Red Bloomer of 91 Squadron comes off anti-diver patrol in bad weather and lands his Spitfire here at RAF Staplehurst to refuel. After taking off again late in the evening for the short flight back to Westmoreland, Red's Spitfire is seen to unaccountably spin down and crash into this field behind the Hop Pole pub at Nettlestead Green, just a couple of miles short of the airfield. The cause of Red Bloomer's crash has never been determined. Friday, June the 30th, 3:37 a.m. A V-1 inbound for London is clipped by anti-aircraft fire from a battery on the North Downs. The hurtling V-1 glances off a tree on Mariners Hill and ploughs into Weald House just outside the village of Crockham Hill in Kent. The isolated country home is one of a number of short-stay nurseries run by the London County Council. 21 children under the age of 3 and 8 staff are killed in the explosion.
It was the coldest, dampest summer I can ever remember. Around London, the crackle of broken glass and slates was always under your feet. Leaves all over the streets in July. The doodlebugs, witches I called them, blew the lot off the trees. Sometimes the bombs would fly in 10 at a time, like dull grey ghosts in and out of the clouds. Always that sound. Then it stops. Then you run like hell.
Take cover!
Do these bombs frighten me? Oh, no. Look at it this way. When it's got to England, well, it's got to find London. When it's found London, it's got to find Bethnal Green. Oh, when it's found Bethnal Green, it's got to find Widow's Walk. Then, it's got to find number 5. And chances are, I'll be down the pub anyway.
It's been a hectic day down here at the Royal Army's Service Corps Supply Depot at Pattenden Lane, Marden. Privates Ken Tippett, Gladys Hager and their colleagues have been busy preparing rations not only to feed the forces on their way through and out to Normandy, but also to feed the hungry gun teams who are on 24-hour diver duty located at their stations in the surrounding countryside. This is where the RASC offices and supply depot once stood. A little further up the lane here is the bakery and cookhouse. Opposite over there is the accommodation for the bakery personnel. And right over there were 2 Nissen huts for the men and 1 block-built army hut for the women. July the 3rd, 2:40 a.m, Northern France. Flak Regiment 155W powers up the Argos pulse jet of a V-1 in the woods southeast of Le Touquet and fires it up the ramp towards England. Ken Tippett recalls what happened 10 minutes later.
To this day, I believe that the one that hit us still had its engine running. Lying there, the noise got louder and louder, and I remember thinking, this is it. And whilst I don't remember the sound of the explosion, I do remember the sensation of the blast on my body, and then the silence. Then the realisation I was still alive.
The bomb destroyed one of the men's Nissen huts and damaged ours. I remember the panic, calling out to the others to gather at the end of the hut. We knew a number of the men had died, but the details were kept from the rest. There was no opportunity to attend their funerals. We weren't even told where they were buried.
After the war, Gladys would later find out that the 11 men who lost their lives that morning in the hut next to hers were in fact laid to rest here in Marden Cemetery, not even half a mile from where they died. Something has to be done about all of this, and fast. As the London and home counties' body count climbs, despondency sets in. It could be weeks before the advancing Allied forces overrun the launch sites. Meanwhile, Britain seems powerless to stop the onslaught. But Duncan Sands, Professor Lindemann, Dr. R.V. Jones and the Crossbow team have just confirmed from agents in France that Vachtel's launch sites are being supplied hundreds of flying bombs per day from 4 main storage bases. The US 8th Air Force bombs all 4 without delay, repeatedly. 3 are put out of action, including Surakour, said to be the most heavily bombed military target of the war, with over 5,000 tons of bombs dropped. At Noukhor, the limestone caves collapse, burying 241 flying bombs beneath hundreds of tons of rubble. The Germans' underground complex at Saint-Loup-d'Esserand, however, is an altogether more challenging proposition. Like Mimoyek, the thickness of its limestone ceiling roof has protected Saint-Loup from any serious damage from raids thus far. Special tactics are therefore required. Which brings us back to that scientist, sharpening his pencil, working out how to destroy these deep underground military bunkers. Over the past few weeks, No. 617 Squadron RAF has been busy training on a new weapon created by this scientist, bouncing bomb pioneer Barnes Wallis. This is the Tall Boy. It weighs 5.5 tons and has a unique aerodynamic design for maximum accuracy and kinetic impact. Dropped from 20,000 feet, the impact velocity is just under the speed of sound. The Tall Boy's high tensile steel reinforced nose is designed to penetrate deep into the earth before the delayed detonation triggers violent shockwaves. These shatter rock formations and underground concrete structures beyond economic repair. As soon as the weapon becomes operational, Tall Boys are used to apocalyptic effect against the underground V1 and V2 storage bunkers at Watton, Wizernes and Surakour. But if you think this bomb's a monster, meet the Tall Boy's big brother, the 10-ton Grand Slam. The day after Marden's V1 tragedy at the army camp, the dam busters take off, loaded with Tall Boys, and attack the V1 storage caves at Saint-Loup-d'Esserand. 2 days later, 617 Squadron pays a visit to the V3 supercannon complex at Mimoyek.
The bombs fell on the concrete roof, and even one fell into the shaft and came down in the lowest level, about 100 meters below our position, killing a lot of people.
Intelligence would later report that hundreds of slave workers at Mimoyek were entombed as a result of the raid. At the time, however, it cannot be determined for certain that whatever the Germans are building there has been permanently put out of action. The effects of the Tallboy raid or Salut d'Esseron, however, become evident in the immediate reduction in V1s fired across the Channel. But there's another problem. By the beginning of July, the skies over Kent are a deadly confusion of RAF Typhoons, Tempests and Spitfires, American P-51s, barrage balloons, ACAC and flying bombs. Tragically, 3 Tempests and a Spitfire have already been shot down by friendly fire. The Allied top brass decides that the anti-aircraft guns that comprise the gun belt must be moved to the coast. This will not only remove the danger of friendly fire over open country, it will concentrate the barrage as the flying bombs cross the coast. In this fashion, an incoming V1 will now have to negotiate a new series of barriers. Firstly, a fighter killing ground safely out over the Channel between the French and English coasts. If the V1 gets through Rowley-Beaumont's Tempest wing at Newchurch and RAF Manston's Mosquitoes, it has a mighty coastal gun belt now to deal with. If the bomb gets through that lot, it has a second fighter killing ground over Kent and Sussex open country on its way into London. And if it survives the Poles, the Brits, the Americans, Aussies and Kiwis, it comes face to face with a belt of 1,000 barrage balloons, soon to be increased to 2,000 by the end of the month.
Here it is, or what remains of it. Called Doodlebug or Buzz Bomb, the pilotless plane with the explosive head is in fact the aerial torpedo. Used as it is by the enemy, it is completely blind, and as an indiscriminate weapon of terror, it represents just about the lowest level which the Germans have reached.
The operation to move the gun belt down to the coast is carried out in absolute secrecy to prevent the Germans finding out that London will be defenceless apart from the balloons and fighters. Over 1,000 anti-aircraft guns, hundreds of tons of ammunition and supplies, support vehicles, staff, thousands of men and women all get it done and down at the seaside in 5 days. It's an incredible achievement.
London was inevitably left undefended for about 48 hours while the guns were on the move, and there were quite high casualties.
The new defence system is assembled, but with a difference. Ongoing Anglo-American scientific cooperation has produced 3 new electronic aids for the gun batteries. 1. The proximity fuse, one of the most closely guarded secrets of the war. The new radar-guided shell can now detect when it is close to a target before detonating. 2. A new centimetric gun-laying radar employing microwaves to detect and track fast-moving objects with far greater accuracy. 3. A new anti-aircraft predictor fire control system, an early computer which calculates and transmits firing solutions to the gun crews. On July the 18th, England's new multi-layered V1 defence system becomes activated. The devastating effect it has on incoming bombs becomes immediately apparent. No one's getting in anybody else's way anymore, and the bomb killing begins. For the weary pilots of 91 Squadron at West Malling, July is a wrapped-up continuation of the non-stop war to destroy the bombs. Matters are made more difficult by the squadron being moved down to a gunbelt base at Deanland in Sussex. Fatigue becomes the real enemy, dulls the senses, slows down the reflexes. An exhausted Jean Maridor has also been busy on another mission. The gallant Norman has proposed to his girlfriend Jean Lambourne, and she's accepted. Now, in between the daily duty of downing doodlebugs, Jean's making arrangements for their August wedding at Oxford, up where Jean's parents have their home. The wedding will never take place. On August the 3rd, just 1 week before the big day, Jean Maridor swoops his Spitfire down onto his last V1, hurtling inbound over the coast. Jean catches up with the bomb over Rovenden village and opens fire. A blast of 20mm cannon hits the V1, but deflects it downward in what is certain to be a direct hit on Benenden School, which houses a large military hospital. In a split second, Jean Maridor makes the call. He jams open the throttle, closes to within 50 yards of the bomb, and unleashes everything. The sky lights up over Benenden. The blast from the 1-ton warhead tears the right wing off his Spitfire, and Captain Maridor and the remains of the V1 plunge into the Kent countryside and the grounds of Benenden School.
Es geht alles vorüber, es geht alles vorbei. Auf jeden Dezember folgt wieder ein Mai.
As the Allies advanced eastwards across northern France, driving the Germans before them, they overtake the V1 launch sites. Most are discovered deserted as Flak Regiment 155W withdraws. Throughout August, the coastal gunners' kill rate of flying bombs continues to rise using the new targeting devices. By the end of the month, the gun belt is shooting down up to 80% of the dwindling number of V1s fired across the channel. The war against the flying bomb is being won, and everyone knows it. September the 5th. On their way through to liberating Boulogne and Calais, troops from the battle-hardened 3rd Canadian Division finally arrive at the V3 complex at Mimoyek. It's been abandoned. Bortscheller and his men pulled out the week before. It turns out the Dambusters Tallboy raid 2 months previously had so ruptured the bunkers that Hitler ordered the project abandoned on July the 30th. Another vengeance weapon has been neutralized.
This is London calling. Here is a broadcast of world news and home news from Britain. It's read by Michael Brooke. First, world news. More than 500 American heavy bombers today attacked Germany's northwest ports of Bremen and Kiel. Last night, strong forces of British heavies bombed 2 German ports in the Baltic, Stettin and Königsberg. British troops advancing into Burma
Holland, Battery No. 2, Artillery Detachment 485 under Hauptmann Neusch, pumps just under 9 metric tons of volatile rocket fuel into the V2, then launches it from a Meiler-Wagen mobile gantry at a crossroads in the affluent suburb of Wassenaar in The Hague.
It came over and came down faster than the speed of sound, so that you heard the explosion from the bomb and then heard it coming a second or two afterwards. And it used to sound rather like a tube train coming into a station.
When I heard the first explosion, I thought it was a terrific clap of thunder. There was a rumbling noise that went on a few seconds after the explosion. Next day, someone told me that a gas main had exploded some miles away. But during the week, there were a few more loud bangs in various parts of southern England, and people began to say, "There goes a gas main."
As more V2s hit southern England, Epping, Fambridge, Lullingstone, the jaded population becomes spooked that Churchill and the government are saying nothing about the mysterious new attacks upon England. Across the Channel, the Allies continue to push eastwards towards Germany, forcing Max Wachtel and Flak Regiment 155W to withdraw up the coast into Belgium and then Holland. Here they set up new V1 launch sites around The Hague and Walcheren Island. Kamler supplies them with bombs with a larger fuel tank capacity to offset the further distance to London. Heinkel bombers, specially modified to air-launch V1s, are also resupplied, and the pounding of England with flying bombs recommences. Throughout September, the German cross-channel shelling intensifies on Hellfire Corner as the Allies close in on Calais. On September the 29th, the Tote Battery blasts its final shell across the Channel before 3rd Canadian overruns the bunkers. The next day, the Mayor of Dover receives a message from the 9th Canadian Infantry Regiment.
To the citizens of Dover, greetings from the brigade. And may you enjoy your pint of beer and stroll on the front in peace from now on. We have all of Jerry's Big Berthas.
Made my way across towards the stall. I was somewhere about 15 yards from me with a cup of tea in my hand and a bit of fish in the other, when all of a sudden, crash, bang, there was a terrific noise. I thought the earth opened up.
Any idea of what it was?
Might be a stratosphere bomb, which seems unlikely. It might be a rocket, or it might be a long-range gun. In any case, it must have traveled a terrific height into the atmosphere in order to come down as it did without us having any prior warning by sound of its approach.
Okay, as always in our excavations, the first thing that we try and ascertain is where the crater is. Once we've established the point of impact, we then mark back the direction which the rocket came in at. And for us, this is quite an important piece of work because it determines where we're going to find the large pieces of wreckage.
This is Hans Kamler's unwanted Valentine's Day gift to the good people of the village of Crouch in Kent. If Kamler meant to hit Winston Churchill in London, he missed by quite a stretch with this one. The rocket arrives at 28 minutes past midnight, 5 minutes after blasting off from The Hague. It detonates in a deserted orchard.
Okay, so we're 5 metres down, and somewhere between 3.2 metres and 5 metres, this has come out of the section. It's one of the bottom feed ports from the bottom of the combustion chamber, feeding alcohol into the double skin of the combustion chamber.
The major worry for the Allied chiefs at this final stage in the war is that the conflict could drag on, resulting in hundreds of thousands of needless casualties unless the Russians take Berlin. And that is only going to happen if the remaining German forces are denied the ability to resist the Soviets now advancing into the eastern part of their country. Two major traffic routes are of paramount importance to the German army at this point: north-south from Germany to Czechoslovakia, and east-west along the Central European uplands. These routes meet in a city which is also the intersection point of 3 rail routes essential to the continued Nazi war effort. RAF Bomber Command and the US 8th Air Force received their orders from on high. Hundreds of crews are briefed and load up for the offensive. Target for tonight: Dresden. The bombing of Dresden is carried out over 3 days and nights in February 1945. Almost 4,000 tons of bombs are dropped on the target, the equivalent of 4,000 V-2 rockets. The bombing and resulting firestorm destroys 7 square kilometers of the city.
Bombardier, okay when you are. Bomb doors open. Bomb doors open, Bombardier. Right. Steady. Bomb's going in a minute.
The veteran 1st Division of the 8th Air Force today carried its 200,000 ton of bombs to help an ally. Now they hit Dresden, hardest of all.
Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels states that over 200,000 have been killed in what amounts to a war crime. The city council at the time, however, estimates the toll at 25,000, including military personnel. A further 2010 study confirmed this figure as being accurate. The bombing of Dresden remains, to this very day, a moral contention. The reputation of Arthur Harris, Chief of RAF Bomber Command, has in the eyes of some been forever stained over the campaign. Was the attack on this old and venerable city justified or remotely necessary? Harold E. Cook, later colonel, was a US aircrew prisoner of war in Dresden at the time of the attacks.
I saw with my own eyes that Dresden was an armed camp. Thousands of German troops, tanks and artillery, and miles of freight cars loaded with supplies supporting German logistics towards the east to meet the Russians.
Dresden reaps the whirlwind. The human cost is devastating. But what Goebbels failed to mention is that by February 1945, under orders of Generaloberst Heinz Guderian, Dresden has been turned into the last major garrison town serving the Eastern Front, and is grimly preparing to face the oncoming Red Army. The Allied chiefs are under no illusions as to Dresden's strategic importance. Arthur Harris was not even the authority who issued the order to bomb the East German city.
As for that Dresden business that is always cropping up, Dresden was bombed on a direct order from Eisenhower's headquarters. And when I informed the Air Ministry that I'd got the order to wreck Chemnitz, Leipzig, Dresden in that order, I had it confirmed in writing from the Air Ministry.
I'm driving out to Chainhurst, a village near Marden, to meet Matt Burke at that rather special field I showed you at the beginning. Matt, thanks so much for coming out. This field here belongs to your family, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And when was the first time you realised that something pretty incredible happened here?
The first time I realised was when Sean and Colin Welch told me about the V2 impact. I'd always had an interest in history, but I'd never assumed it'd be here, just right under the ground.
And do you know exactly what happened?
On March the 9th, 1945, at 2:15, a V2 rocket hit this field at supersonic speed.
"74 years later, with Matt and his family's permission, Sean and Colin Welch of Research Resource Archaeology put a team together and come out to see what they could dig up. So Matt, what have you got there?
This is a 20mm cannon shell casing, the sort used by RAF fighters whilst hunting V1 doodlebugs. We found it in the V2 crater, but it is in fact completely unrelated. It is from a separate V1 pursuit whose path just happened to cross where the V2 hit.
Lurches to its inevitable conclusion, Colonel Max Wachtel of Flak Regiment 155W finished their campaign with a final flurry. 21 flying bombs are launched in the early hours of March the 29th, 1945. Only one makes it through the guns, the fighters and the barrage balloons to become the last V1 to crash down on English soil. Max Wachtel retreats into Germany, refashions his flak regiment into an infantry unit, and stands against the British advance at Lüneburg. but it's clear to everyone that the war is over. On May the 4th, 1945, 4 days after the reported suicide of Adolf Hitler, Oberst Max Wachtel and his men, along with other German units, lay down their weapons and unconditionally surrender to Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery.
What do you think about us going over to Berlin and doing the same to them?
I should think so too. A bit worse than this, I hope, with a wicked bugger like he is.
Bomb them tenfold. I'm sorry for the women and children of Berlin, but what about the women and children of this country?
Well, if I was a man, I'd go over there and I'd give them the same as what they gave us here.